workshop, if any of you are left around here on Friday, I talked a lot about the Network of Biblical Storytellers. And I've been with that organization for a long time, and either the first or the second one that I attended, our featured teller, Mr. Donald Davis, was the keynoter. And he used an expression that year that has stuck with me, and he talked about parallel storytelling. And that is where you can sort of put the stories, and I hope I'm not misquoting you, put the stories together and they kind of reflect off one another. And I think I latched on to that expression because that was a lot of what I was doing anyhow. And it just I didn't know a name for it. And so what I have here today is to share with you a familiar biblical story along with a story that I wrote and kind of mashed it up together. In the musical world, I think they call it a remix. I call it a kind of a smasher up here. Bring them in, bring them in, bring the lost and the wandering in. Bring them in, bring them in. Let your love and your witness bring the lost ones in. The Lord is my shepherd by night and by day. Even when I stray, my shepherd will not let me get too far away or too long stay. With open arms, my shepherd welcomes me home, and if need be, will meet me part way. There was a man who had 2 sons. Sammy Sheep had lived a good life so far. He lived with his mama, You Baby, his daddy, Rambo, and his little sister, Lamb Chops, along with lots of aunts and uncles and cousins in the same sheepfold all his life. They were family. Now, life is pretty easy for a sheep. They don't have that much work to do. They're not exactly what we call beasts of burden. And they only really have a couple of rules to follow. The first one is always follow your shepherd. And the second one is one that parents give to their children. Don't go with strangers. So if a sheep would follow these 2 simple rules, follow your shepherd and don't go with strangers, they can live a pretty easy life, pretty worry-free life. Because if the sheep would follow the shepherd, they didn't ever have to worry about food or drink, because the shepherd would lead them to early morning green pastures where they could eat the green grass and drink the morning dew. If the sheep wouldn't go with strangers and would follow the shepherd, they didn't have to worry about danger because the shepherd would take care of them, even if it meant putting his own life at risk. Why, a good shepherd, a true shepherd, would even lie down at the opening of a sheepfold to protect his precious sheep, to keep him from the hands of thieves or the mouths of hungry wolves. Why, Sammy have been told stories about that great shepherd David from the time that he was knee-high to a ram, and how he would rescue his sheep from the mouths of wolves and bears. 2 rules. Follow and don't go with. And life could be sweet for the sheep. And Sammy did follow the rules for a while. Then he got a little restless. The younger son went to his father and said, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So the father divided his property between his two sons. As Sammy got older, he got like people children get sometimes when they get older. He didn't want to stay with the flock any longer. He wanted to graze where he wanted to graze. He didn't want to follow the shepherd or the rules anymore. So Sammy decided to leave home. Not long after the son had received his share of the inheritance, he gathered together all that he had and set out for a distant country where he squandered all his money in wild living. Sammy left his sheepfold. He left his shepherd. He left his family and began wandering off. And as he was wandering away, he met up with some goats hanging out on a nearby hillside. Now the leader of the herd of goats saw that sheep wandering off by himself, and he knew that this was not ordinarily the way the sheep travel. So he called out to Sammy and said, "Hey sheep, you look lost. You ought to come and go with us. We'll take care of you. We'll help you find your way. We got your back." And Sammy thought, cool. He had heard that goats know how to have fun. So he went wandering off behind those goats. Now, about the time that the son lost all of his money, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in want. He was hungry. He hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to work in the fields, feeding the pigs. Now those goats, they were wild, and they did know how to have a good time. But their idea of fun was not the same as Sammy's idea of fun. Goats are biters and butters. And while for them that was fun play, Sammy didn't see it that way. Those goats, they didn't take care of Sammy. They didn't help him find his way. They didn't have his back. In fact, those goats, they would go off all the time. They'd run off and leave Sammy alone in strange places. And as far as food went, those goats were so greedy they ate up all the food, roots and all. Didn't take Sammy long to realize that these goats didn't care anything about him. That these goats were not going to take care of him. They weren't going to help him find his way or his way home. Didn't take Sammy long to realize that it was just a matter of time before those goats left him behind to come become the wolf's dinner. When the son came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's servants have food enough to eat, and here I am starving to death? I will get up, and I will go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and I have sinned against you. I am no longer worthy to be your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." So he got up and went to his father. Sammy missed his home. He longed for his mama, you baby. He longed for his daddy, Rambo, even his little sister, Lamb Chops, though she could get on his nerves sometimes. Yet, while he was still a long way off, the father saw him. Sammy longed for early morning green pastures. He longed for his shepherd who would never lead him too close to dangerous waters, who would never leave him behind to become the wolf's dinner. Sammy thought, my shepherd loves me. My shepherd knows me. While he was yet still a way off, the father saw him. And the father had compassion on him. And he ran to him, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. Sammy! Sammy! Off in the distance, Sammy heard his name being called. The son said to his father, Father, I have sinned against heaven and I have sinned against you. I am no longer worthy to be your son. But even while the son was speaking, his father called to his servants, quick, find the best robe and bring it and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found. And they began to celebrate. Sammy. He could hear his voice being called louder and louder as the shepherd drew nearer and nearer to him, and the shepherd saw him and he recognized him. When the shepherd reached Sammy, he picked him up in his arms and said, at last, Sammy, I found you. At last. Come, let me take you home to your family. Let me take you home where you belong. Even though the shepherd had spotted Sammy at a great distance, though the sun was still a long way off, even though Sammy's fleece was matted with mud and sticks and ticks and burrs, his father saw him and had compassion on him. The shepherd saw Sammy. The father ran to him and put his arms around him and kissed him. The shepherd loved him. We must have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. A sheep was lost and is now found. Bring them in, bring them in, bring the lost and the wandering in. Bring them in, bring them in. Let your love and your witness bring the lost ones home. Amen.
All right.